The rain hammered against the windows of Hawthorne Estate as if the heavens themselves protested what was about to happen inside. I stood at the threshold of the grand foyer, the polished marble floor gleaming under the chandelier's cold light. The last words my grandfather whispered to me echo in my mind. Stand tall when they try to erase you. Straightening my spine, I stepped forward, clutching the thin gold chain tucked beneath my blouse, the only thing left of him that no one could take away. The annual gathering felt different this year. It always did after a death, but the air tonight was thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves strained under the weight of unspoken things. Distant relatives filled the hall, exchanging polished smiles and perfunctory hugs, but their eyes darted to me with thinly veiled suspicion. I caught snippets of their whispers, like tiny knives. She's still working at that charity, isn't she? Such a waste of Hawthorne blood. Poor William, he had such high hopes for her. I ignored them, forcing my lips into a polite smile, my palms cold against the satin of my dress pants. Clara Mendoza, the longtime housekeeper, hovered near the back of the room, a tray balanced in her hands. Our eyes met briefly. She gave me the slightest nod, an anchor in the storm. Dinner was a performance. Crystal glasses clinked, silverware chimed, and the conversations danced around the elephant in the room, the question of who would inherit Hawthorne Industries. I sat 2 seats down from my father, Richard Hawthorne, the patriarch who wielded silence sharper than any sword. On his right sat Cole, my younger brother by 4 years. Charming, confident, every inch the image of a successor. Wine flowed freely, and the hollow laughter grew louder. When the dessert plates were cleared, Richard finally rose, tapping his glass with a heavy ring. The room fell silent. "I suppose you're all wondering why we've gathered tonight," he said, voice smooth as marble, yet carrying a weight that made the chandeliers tremble. "Tradition calls for remembrance, for family unity, and for decisions." His gaze swept the room before landing on me. A slow, cold smile tugged at his lips. "Elise," he drawled, "it's good to see you back in these halls. Still chasing noble dreams, I hear? Saving the world, one cause at a time?" A few polite chuckles fluttered around the table. I held my ground, refusing to shrink. Richard leaned forward, voice dropping just enough to carry to every corner of the room. "Some people," he said, swirling the wine in his glass, "choose practicality. Others choose sentimentality. And sentimentality, unfortunately, doesn't keep a dynasty alive." Heat prickled behind my eyes, but I blinked it back. I would not break. Not here. Cole watched me, an apologetic tilt to his head that fooled no one. Richard straightened, pulling a heavy leather folder from beside his chair. "And so," he continued, "with great thought and the best interests of Hawthorne Industries in mind, I hereby name Cole Hawthorne as my successor." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the table. I sat frozen, my heartbeat thundering louder than the rain outside. My father opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers, documents thick with official seals and signatures. He slid them across the polished oak table toward Cole. "You've earned it, son," Richard said, clapping Cole's shoulder with a thud that sounded like a verdict. Then he turned to me, his smile sharpening into a blade. "And you, Elise," he said, voice dripping mockery, "have proven yourself a sentimental liability." The words struck harder than any blow. The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my own blood in my ears. Still, I didn't move. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I folded my hands in my lap, steadying them with sheer force of will. Around me, the polished smiles returned. Some pitying, most triumphant. Clara, standing silently by the wall, clutched her tray tighter, her knuckles whitening. She knew. She had always known. Just as Richard leaned back, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes, a cough broke the charged silence. Mr. Bennett, the family's longtime attorney, cleared his throat and said, "Before we proceed, there's another matter." Sometimes the strongest shields are the ones forged in silence. The private meeting room felt colder than the rain-soaked halls we had left behind. Dim sconces threw muted pools of light across the heavy oak table where the remaining members of the Hawthorne dynasty gathered. Above us, ancestral portraits loomed from the walls, their painted gazes full of judgment and disdain. Grandfather's old compass, once given to me, felt heaviest in my pocket, like it knew this moment would come. I slipped my hand into my coat, pressing my fingers against the cool metal, grounding myself. Richard sat rigidly at the head of the table, his jaw ticking in restrained triumph. Cole lounged to his right, twirling a Mont Blanc pen between his fingers as if he had already signed his future into existence. Clara stood near the door, half in shadow, her tray now forgotten on a sideboard. And Mr. Bennet, the ever-unassuming family attorney, stood at the far end, holding a thick leather folder against his chest like a shield. He cleared his throat once, then again. I know tonight has been significant. He began carefully, eyes flicking from Richard to me. But before any documents are finalized, there's an outstanding matter that must be addressed. Richard's face darkened. "What matter?" he demanded. With a slow, deliberate motion, Mr. Bennet set the folder on the table and withdrew a smaller envelope, sealed in faded red wax. Even from across the room, I recognized the handwriting. William Hawthorne Sr., my grandfather. "This," Mr. Bennet said, voice gaining strength, "is an amendment to the will, filed 6 years ago at the Boston Registry. It was to remain sealed unless certain conditions were met." Cole straightened in his chair, interest sharpening. Richard leaned forward, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. "And what conditions would those be?" he asked, a dangerous softness in his tone. Mr. Bennet didn't blink. In the event that Elise Hawthorne was deemed unworthy, or was deliberately excluded from succession without just cause. The room stilled. The ticking of a distant clock became thunderous. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, unsure whether to soar or cower. Richard barked a humorless laugh, pushing back from the table. "Preposterous," he spat. "William was a sentimental old fool. He would never undermine me like this." Cole's pen slipped from his fingers, clattering noisily onto the table. Mr. Bennet ignored the outburst, sliding the envelope toward me. "Per his instructions, Elise, you have the right to hear the contents first." I stared at it, my hand hovering uncertainly. Fear and hope warred inside me, a collision of storms. Taking a breath, I broke the seal. Mr. Bennet read aloud, each word cutting into the tense air. "In the event that my granddaughter Elise Hawthorne is deemed unworthy by the acting board or patriarch, I hereby grant her controlling authority over my personal shares of Hawthorne Industries, effective immediately. This amendment supersedes any prior succession plans." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard surged to his feet, fists slamming onto the table with a crack that made Clara jump. "This is a forgery," he roared, "a pathetic, desperate stunt." Mr. Bennet remained unmoved. "The document is notarized, registered, and witnessed by 2 legal parties. Any challenge would require substantial evidence of fraud, which, I assure you, does not exist." Richard's glare promised war, but beneath it, for the first time, I saw something else. Doubt. Fear. Cole shoved back his chair, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You think this piece of paper changes anything?" He snapped at me, voice tinged with a desperate edge. "You think a dusty amendment overrides everything we've built?" I didn't answer. I couldn't trust my voice not to betray the riot within me. Instead, I looked at Clara. Without a word, she stepped forward, producing a slim manila folder from the inside of her blazer. A folder she had kept hidden through the dinner, through the public humiliation, through everything. She placed it gently in front of Mr. Bennet. He opened it, scanned the contents, then looked up at Richard with a heaviness that spoke volumes. "Included in this file," Mr. Bennet said, voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel, "are records of Cole Hawthorne's unauthorized withdrawals and transfers during his internship at Hawthorne Industries' London office, 5 years ago. sums large enough to breach fiduciary duty clauses. Cole froze mid-step. The blood drained from his face so quickly it was almost mesmerizing. A long, excruciating beat passed. Then, slowly, Cole turned back toward me. He leaned in close, too close, his breath warm and sour against my ear. "No one will believe you," he whispered, lips barely moving, a smirk ghosting across his face. And somehow, despite the fear clawing at my chest, I smiled. Not because I was certain of victory, but because for the first time he wasn't. The deadliest battles are fought not with swords, but with whispers. Morning light spilled into the grand hall of Hawthorne Estate, bouncing off the polished marble and gilded fixtures. It should have felt warm, welcoming. Instead, it felt surgical, cold in its precision. I lingered near the edge of the room, a china cup cradled in my hands, the coffee inside untouched. Across the sea of linen-draped tables and glinting silverware, the vultures had already begun to circle. A memory surfaced, grandfather's voice low and firm as he placed the compass into my palm years ago. "The louder they are, the more they fear what you carry." I closed my eyes briefly, breathing in the strength of that thought, letting it armor me against the glances slicing across the hall. Richard sat at the head of a long table, casually conversing with a cluster of relatives whose sycophantic laughter rose and fell in time with his smug anecdotes. Cole drifted easily among the guests, flashing his perfect smile, leaning close to whisper poison into receptive ears. I caught fragments of it. Careless, cutting. Such a shame, really. Elise always meant well, but some people aren't built for leadership. She had a breakdown during that charity project abroad. They covered it up, of course. The words floated toward me, sticky and noxious. I kept my face neutral, the cup steady in my hand even as my stomach knotted. Another voice, lower but no less lethal. I heard she mismanaged the funds. Barely escaped a scandal. Soft laughter followed, muffled behind manicured hands and faux concerned eyes. I moved to the sideboard under the guise of refilling my coffee, focusing instead on the reflection in the silver urns, catching the tilt of heads, the glances tossed like stones at my back. Clara appeared beside me, her presence a balm against the rising acid in my throat. She didn't speak, didn't meet my eyes, merely adjusted a stack of napkins. As her hand brushed mine, I felt something thin and hard slip into my palm. A flash drive, small and inconspicuous. I closed my fingers around it, heart thudding. Without a word, Clara moved away, blending seamlessly into the background. I retreated down a side corridor, away from the brittle laughter and sharp gazes, until I found an empty study with an ancient laptop left idling on the desk. I slid into the chair, my fingers trembling slightly as I plugged in the drive. Fill names populated the screen instantly. Internal audit reports, London office transfers, unauthorized expense accounts. I clicked through them, pulse quickening with every document opened. Numbers twisted into patterns. Withdrawals, falsified approvals, payouts hidden under shell charities. Cole hadn't just skimmed the surface. He had bled Hawthorne Industries dry for years. Anger and sorrow warred within me. I wanted to scream, to tear through the halls and confront them all. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. Steady, quiet, calculated. I downloaded copies onto the desktop, my hands moving almost mechanically, my mind a hurricane of betrayal and resolve. As I worked, a soft ping sounded. A new email. From a name I barely remembered. Lila Granger, once a senior accountant at Hawthorne Industries before she had been restructured out of existence. The message was simple. "We believe in you. If you stand, we will stand too." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unbidden, not from weakness, but from the sudden, overwhelming sense that I was not as alone as they wanted me to believe. I removed the USB, tucking it securely into the inner pocket of my jacket. Back in the grand hall, the murmurs and sideways glances continued unabated. They thought they had isolated me. They thought they had won. As I crossed the marble floor, my stride steadier, My heart heavier but harder, I caught Cole's smirk from across the room, the lazy confidence of a man who thought his victory assured. I smiled back, because they had no idea what was coming. As I plugged the USB into my laptop later that evening, my hands shook. But my eyes hardened. I had everything I needed to fight back. The truth, once unleashed, devours the lies faster than fire on dry wood. The conference room at Hawthorne Estate had never felt so small. Heavy velvet curtains muted the rain outside, but inside the atmosphere crackled with barely contained electricity. I stood at the far end of the long mahogany table, facing a sea of faces. Family, shareholders, loyalists, opportunists, all perched on the edge of suspicion. Remembering Clara's whispered words steadied my hands. You're stronger because you choose when to strike, not when they provoke you. I gripped the edge of the table, feeling the coolness of the wood ground me, and lifted my chin. This meeting is no longer a celebration, I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence. It's a reckoning. Richard narrowed his eyes, a flicker of warning flashing across his face. Cole lounged in his chair, one ankle resting casually over his knee, exuding a practiced ease that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mr. Bennet, seated quietly to my left, adjusted his glasses and gave a subtle nod. He was here to moderate, but he was also here to witness. I set a folder on the table and began pulling out sheets one by one. Ledgers, audit reports, transaction records. Over the past 3 years, I said clearly, there have been irregularities in Hawthorne Industries' overseas accounts, transfers authorized under phantom subsidiaries, shell charities receiving donations that never reached any legitimate cause. Soft murmurs began rippling down the table. I heard a cousin whisper, a hand pressed to her mouth. Could it be true? Cole chuckled, a hollow, brittle sound. You're reaching, Elise, he said lazily. Everyone knows overseas accounts are messy. It's paperwork, nothing more. Messy, I echoed, laying down another set of documents. Then explain the matching signatures on approvals from companies that don't exist outside of mailbox addresses. Explain the same wire routing numbers repeating through at least 6 different charities. Cole leaned forward, the mask slipping. His smile sharpened into something cruel. You're desperate, he hissed. Forging documents won't save you. I didn't flinch. Instead, I nodded at Mr. Bennet, who rose slowly, carrying a small black device to the head of the table. He plugged it into the conference room's projector system. The screen flickered to life. A grainy security feed filled the screen. Cole entering the finance department office after hours alone. Cole unlocking the safe where hard copies of quarterly audits were stored. Cole extracting files, plugging in a USB drive. Cole altering entries on screen. The timestamp blazed in the corner, a date aligning perfectly with the first flagged irregularity. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a coffee cup. It shattered on the polished floor, but no one moved to clean it. The footage looped once before Mr. Bennet shut it down, leaving the room to stew in its own horrified silence. Cole sat frozen, his bravado evaporated, replaced by a dull flush creeping up his neck. I turned slowly to Richard, who sat immobile, the weight of the moment pressing visibly onto his shoulders. Forgery? I said, voice steady, slicing. Or fireproof evidence? Richard's jaw clenched so tightly the veins at his temple pulsed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the whispers began. Low, rapid, unstoppable. Questions, doubts, accusations, not directed at me. At them. At Cole. At Richard. I straightened to my full height, feeling the weight of grandfather's compass against my heart. This wasn't vengeance. This was reclamation. Richard rose abruptly, the chair screeching backward with a violence that sliced through the chaos. He pushed back his chair violently, his face ashen. The dynasty he tried to control was crumbling before him. Sometimes the most deafening roar is the refusal to speak. The conference room still pulsed with the aftermath of revelation, the scent of fear sharp as ozone in the heavy air. No one dared meet my eyes. The same relatives who had so easily dismissed me the night before now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their polished facades cracking under the weight of exposed truth. The family motto, etched above the estate's entrance in wrought iron, "Honor above all," felt like a cruel joke now, an empty echo clanging inside my head. Richard remained seated at the head of the table, hands folded so tightly together it seemed they might fuse. His face was carved from stone, lips a grim line, eyes distant. He didn't speak. Not a word of defense. Not a plea. Not even a denial. He simply sat there, watching the empire he had built on intimidation and selective affection crumble to dust in real time. Mr. Bennet adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. "As per the contingency outlined in William Hawthorne Sr.'s amendment," he said with slow, deliberate care, "effective immediately, controlling interest of Hawthorne Industries is hereby transferred to Elise Hawthorne." A small gasp escaped someone near the end of the table. Cole shot to his feet, knocking over his chair, the legs clattering against the marble. "This is insanity," he barked, face flushed, desperation leaking from every pore. "You can't just hand it all to her. She's not—" "No one's listening, Cole," I said quietly, the words cutting deeper than any shout. He froze, breathing hard, scanning the room for allies and finding none. One by one, eyes dropped away from his. Even the ones who had cheered his rise 2 nights ago now recoiled from his downfall, as if afraid treachery could rub off like dirt. Mr. Bennet produced the final set of documents from his folder and laid them before me. A sleek black pen lay atop the page, almost absurdly ordinary considering what it represented. I hesitated for only a moment, feeling the weight of generations, of battles fought and lost in these very walls, pressing against my shoulders. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about reclaiming what was mine. Not through rage, but through rightful, steady hands. I signed. Each stroke of ink felt like a silent drumbeat, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. When I finished, Mr. Bennet took the documents and placed them reverently into his briefcase, as if sealing history itself inside. A new silence fell. Heavier, final. I gathered my papers, my steps measured, my heart a strange cocktail of triumph and sorrow. The family name still meant something to me, despite all they had done. Perhaps because of it. What good was a legacy if not reclaimed and remade? As I reached the door, something pulled at me, an invisible thread tying me back to the beginning. I turned. Richard was watching me. Not with hatred, not with anger, but with something far more hollow. Resignation. The look of a man who realized too late what he had sacrificed on the altar of pride. Our eyes met across the wreckage of everything he had tried to control. And for a moment, neither of us moved, bound by the terrible knowledge of all that had been lost, and all that might yet be salvaged if we were brave enough. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded once, small, firm, and walked away, leaving the old world behind. The room where power once shifted with whispers now stood still, the silence bearing witness to a dynasty unraveled by its own deceit. Victory came not with thunderous applause, but with a quiet signature, a single act that rewrote the future. Justice is never a gift. It is earned through scars, through standing steady when the ground is shifting beneath your feet. Like a tide wearing down the tallest fortress, truth moves slowly but leaves no stone unturned once it arrives. Sometimes reclaiming what is rightfully yours requires not louder voices, but the unwavering courage to endure, to outlast, and to finally rise.